Delta Colony, a small outpost located on the edge of known space, was not a place of warmth or welcoming. The settlement was rough, populated by miners, engineers, and the occasional scientist. The people here were hard, just like the life they led, living in a constant struggle against the harsh environment. But there was one thing that made life even harder: the figure who walked among them, a figure whose very presence sent chills through the colonists' bones. Her name was Kyra. To most of the colony's inhabitants, she was no more than a monster. And she knew it. Standing tall and imposing, Kyra's appearance was nothing short of terrifying. Her skin, smooth and translucent, glowed faintly under the colony's artificial lights, as though her body was filled with some mysterious energy. Her eyes were large and black, unblinking, and far too sharp in their intensity. She had 6 fingers on each hand, claws that gleamed in the dim light. Her very form seemed alien, a cruel reminder of the bioengineering that had created her. Kyra had been created long ago by a faction of the human race that had sought to build the ultimate weapon. She had been designed to fight in wars, a tool for destruction. But when she had broken free from her creators, rejecting the violence they had tried to force her into, she had become something else entirely: an outcast, a pariah. And now she was stranded on Delta Colony, an unwelcome guest. The people of the colony treated her with disdain, their fear of her mutating into something even darker. They told stories about her, stories of how she was once a weapon, a killer. No one bothered to look beyond her appearance, beyond the image of the monster they had created in their minds. Kyra worked in the colony's mines, her strength unmatched by any human. She was invaluable for the most dangerous jobs, lifting heavy machinery, breaking through tough rock formations, and digging in places where no one else could go. But the workers never spoke to her. They never looked her in the eye, and when she did happen to glance their way, they quickly turned their backs, murmuring curses under their breath. There was one exception. Liam Cross, a new arrival to the colony, had noticed her. He was a young xenobiologist, recently assigned to Delta Colony for research purposes. He wasn't like the others, where the miners saw a monster. Liam saw a mystery. He was drawn to Kyra, though he knew the dangers of approaching her. But he didn't let the gossip or the fear of the others stop him. There was something about her that made him want to understand. On his second day of the colony, Liam saw her for the first time. She was standing alone in the clearing near the mine entrance, her back to the setting sun. The light made her skin glow, casting strange, eerie shadows around her. For a moment, Liam thought she was a ghost, a figure out of a nightmare. But he quickly dismissed that thought. He had read enough about the legends of the Xyrans, genetically modified beings who had once fought in the war that nearly tore apart the galaxy. He had never believed the stories. Kyra was real. But what was she now? Liam wasn't sure how to approach her, but he knew he had to try. He had seen the way the other colonists avoided her, how they looked at her with distrust and fear. He had seen the coldness in their eyes when they spoke of her. But what if there was more to her than what they believed? Taking a deep breath, he made his way toward her. His heart beat loudly in his chest, and his palms were sweaty. As he walked closer, Kyra turned her head, her dark eyes locking with his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Liam opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't know what to say. But Kyra broke the silence first. "I don't belong here," she said, her voice deep but steady. The words came as a surprise to Liam, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if she was speaking to him or to herself. "I never did." Liam hesitated. He had read reports about Kyra before he came to the colony, but those reports were filled with technical data and impersonal details. They didn't mention things like her voice, her loneliness, or the way her words seemed to echo the pain in her eyes. He could see it now, the weight of all that she had been through, all the rejection and fear. "You're not a monster," Liam said quietly, hoping she could hear him. Kyra's expression softened, just for a moment. "That's not what they think." Her gaze shifted toward the distant horizon, as if searching for something beyond the colony's walls. Liam wanted to say more, but he didn't know how to reach her. He didn't understand her pain, her past. All he could do was offer a small smile. "I'll be around if you need anything." For the first time, Zira looked at him with something that almost resembled curiosity. She said nothing, but the slight tilt of her head suggested she was considering something. And so began the quietest of alliances. The people of Delta Colony would never understand Sarah, but Liam would try. They would see only the monster, but he would see the woman who was more than the creation of war, more than the weapon they feared. Sarah didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change. And for the first time, someone dared to see her as something more than a monster. The days on Delta Colony were long, and the work was never easy. It was a place where people kept their heads down, focused on survival, and avoided anything that might cause trouble. But in those quiet moments, between the sounds of machines and the distant rumble of the mines, Liam Cross found himself thinking more and more about Sarah. She was an enigma. Her appearance alone was enough to make anyone turn away in fear. But to Liam, there was something different about her, something deeper that made him want to understand her. It wasn't just her alien features or her intimidating presence. It was the look in her eyes, the sadness that seemed to hang over her like a cloud, and the way she never spoke to anyone unless it was necessary. Liam had seen her several times now. He'd watched her from afar as she worked in the mines, lifting heavy rocks and machinery that would take 5 or 6 men to move. The colonists would call out to her for help, but they never once offered her a word of gratitude. They simply used her as a tool, just like the machines she worked with. But to Liam, she wasn't just a tool. She was a person, and that thought began to gnaw at him more than he expected. One afternoon, as the colony buzzed with the usual activity, Liam spotted Sarah again. She was standing alone by the edge of the clearing, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The way the light hit her skin made her look almost otherworldly. Her bioluminescence glowed faintly, and for a moment, Liam felt as if he were seeing something no one else could. He stood there for a while, just observing her. He had thought about approaching her many times, but each time, doubt held him back. What would he say to her? What would she think? But now, something inside him pushed him forward. He couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was important. With a deep breath, Liam walked toward her. He kept his pace steady, trying not to seem like he was rushing. When he was only a few feet away, Sarah turned to face him, her black eyes locking with his. Her gaze was sharp, almost predatory, and for a second, Liam felt a chill run down his spine. He stopped, uncertain of what to do next. But Sarah didn't speak. Instead, she just looked at him, waiting for him to make the first move. "Hello," Liam said, his voice steady but soft. Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she didn't say anything. She seemed to be sizing him up, studying him like a creature in the wild. Liam wasn't sure what to do next. He had imagined this moment a dozen times, but none of those imagined conversations had prepared him for this silence. "I'm not like them," he said, his voice quieter now. "I don't believe the stories." Sarah tilted her head slightly, a gesture that reminded him of a curious animal. It was clear she was unsure of his intentions. "What do you mean?" she asked finally, her voice deep and calm. Liam took a step closer, but still kept a safe distance. "I mean, I don't believe you're a monster. I don't believe you're dangerous." For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind rustling through the colony's distant structures. Sarah's eyes softened, but she still didn't move. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Liam smiled gently, trying to ease the tension. "I know you're not what they say you are." Sarah seemed to consider this for a moment, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter what you think," she said quietly. "The truth is, I don't belong here. I never have." Liam was taken aback by the sadness in her voice. It was raw, almost painful. He wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but he wasn't sure what words could ease the kind of pain she carried. "You're wrong," Liam said softly. "You do belong here. This place might not understand you, but that doesn't mean you don't belong." Zira looked at him, her eyes searching his face, trying to read him. She seemed torn, unsure whether to trust him. She had been rejected by everyone she had ever met. And now, here was this strange human, offering her something she had never received before: kindness. "I don't want your pity," Zira said, her tone cold and distant. "I don't need anyone's pity." Liam nodded, understanding more than she realized. "I'm not offering pity," he said. "I'm just trying to understand." The silence stretched between them again, but this time it wasn't as tense. It was almost comfortable. "Why do you help them?" Liam asked after a moment, his curiosity getting the better of him. "The miners, I mean. They treat you like a tool." Zira glanced down at her hands, her 6 fingers flexing slightly. "I don't have a choice," she said quietly. "They need me. And sometimes it's easier to just do what they want than to fight." Liam frowned, feeling the weight of her words. "But you're not a tool. You're not just some weapon." Zira looked up at him, her gaze intense. "That's all I was ever meant to be. And that's all they see me as." Liam didn't know how to respond to that. It was clear that the burden of her past weighed heavily on her. He wanted to say something comforting, something that would change her view of herself, but the words didn't come. "I don't know what happened to you," Liam said after a long pause, "but I do know that you're more than what you think you are." Zira looked at him for a long time, as though considering his words. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter this time. Maybe you're right," she said, though there was doubt in her tone. "But it's hard to believe that after everything." Liam smiled softly. "It's okay. You don't have to believe me right away. But I'll be here, if you want to talk." For the first time, Zira seemed to relax, just a little. She nodded once, then turned back toward the horizon, as though the conversation had ended. Liam stood there for a while longer, watching her. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. Zira was not a monster. She was someone who needed understanding, someone who deserved more than the cold rejection she had known for so long. And somehow he was going to show her that. The calm of Delta Colony was shattered one evening when a strange object appeared in the sky. It wasn't a ship, at least not in the usual sense. It was something more terrifying, something that sent chills through everyone who saw it. Liam had just finished his daily research when he noticed it. A strange, shimmering light, flickering in the sky like a star that didn't belong. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a trick of his tired eyes. But then the object began to move, slowly at first, and then faster, until it was hovering just outside the colony's orbit. The lights on the ship pulsed, a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. It wasn't like anything he'd ever seen before. It was a ship, but unlike any design known to humanity. The metal surface of the craft shimmered as if it were made of liquid, shifting and changing with every movement. It was unlike any alien technology that had been cataloged, and the colonists, once skeptical of the dangers lurking in space, were immediately on edge. Liam stood at the colony's observation deck, his mind racing. His first instinct was to warn everyone, to take action, but he knew better than to panic. The colonists might have lived in isolation for years, but they weren't without their own resources. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a friendly visit. The ship didn't feel like an ally. It felt wrong. The colony's communications officer, Sasha, quickly scrambled to send a signal to the ship, trying to make contact. But their attempts were met with silence. It was clear that whoever, or whatever, was on board had no interest in speaking with them. A sense of dread swept over the colony as the ship's presence lingered in the sky. What was its purpose? Why had it come? Was it an invitation or a warning? Hours passed in tense silence. Liam couldn't concentrate on his research. His thoughts kept returning to the strange ship. What if it was here to harm them? What if it was a threat from a civilization that had no interest in peace? Meanwhile, Syrah was working in the mines, unaware of the danger above. She had been keeping to herself more lately, spending her days in solitude. But something about the growing tension in the air made her uneasy. When the alarm was finally sounded, signaling the colony to prepare for potential danger, she knew that something was terribly wrong. Syrah didn't hesitate. She rushed to the surface, moving with a speed and grace that startled those around her. She could feel the fear of the colonists, could hear the panic in their voices as they scrambled to prepare for whatever might be coming. Her mind raced with thoughts of what this alien ship could be. It was strange, unlike any ship she had ever seen in her years as a soldier. And she had seen many. She made her way to Liam's quarters, hoping to find him there. She didn't know why, but she felt that if anyone could make sense of the situation, it would be him. He was the one person who had treated her like a person and not a weapon. He had given her the chance to be something more. When she reached his quarters, she found him staring at the observation screen, watching the strange ship in the sky. The look on his face mirrored her own: unease, curiosity, and a deep sense of foreboding. "You see it too," Syrah said, her voice barely a whisper. Liam turned to face her, his expression grim. "I've never seen anything like it. It's not just any ship. This is something different." Syrah's eyes narrowed, her senses alert. She knew that there was something dangerous about the ship, something not immediately visible, but what exactly it was, she couldn't say. Liam moved toward the console and began to type, trying to access more information on the alien ship. But the communication lines were still blocked, the ship's technology cutting off their attempts to reach it. "We need to figure out what they want," Liam said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't sit here and wait for them to make the first move. We need to know who they are and why they're here." Syrah nodded. "I'll go." Liam looked at her in surprise. You'll go? To the ship?" Syrah gave him a sharp look. "I've dealt with aliens before. I'm the best chance we have." Liam knew there was no arguing with her. She was right. If anyone could make contact with the alien ship, it would be her. The colony had no other way of knowing what they were up against. He knew Syrah had the skills and experience to handle such a dangerous mission. "I'll go with you," Liam said, his voice steady. "I'm not letting you go alone." Syrah hesitated. For a moment, she thought of refusing him. She didn't want to risk him. But then, she realized that if anyone was going to help, it was him. He had already shown that he wasn't afraid to stand by her. So reluctantly, she nodded. "All right, we'll go together." The two of them made their way to the colony's shuttle bay, preparing for the journey to the unknown ship hovering in space. As they suited up and made their final checks, Liam couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The unknown was terrifying, but they had no choice but to face it. They boarded the shuttle, and Syrah piloted them toward the alien ship, her movements sharp and precise. As they drew closer, the eerie hum of the ship grew louder, vibrating through the shuttle's hull. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random visit. This was a warning, a message, and somehow, Syrah was the key to understanding it. The shuttle hummed through the cold, dark expanse of space, drawing ever closer to the alien ship. Its strange, shimmering surface had loomed larger with every passing moment. Syrah kept her focus on the controls, her hands moving smoothly as she guided the shuttle through the void. She wasn't afraid. This was what she was trained for. But even she couldn't shake the unease creeping into her mind. There was something different about this ship, something unsettling that gnawed at her. Beside her, Liam watched in silence, his eyes scanning the readings on his console. The ship's presence disrupted their communications and sensors, making it difficult to gather any real data. There was no telling what kind of technology they were dealing with, but Liam knew one thing for sure. This ship was not like anything humanity had ever encountered before. The minutes dragged on as they closed the gap, the alien ship now filling the view screen. It was a massive structure, not built for comfort or style, but for something far more practical, survival, perhaps, or domination. Its smooth, organic shape made it seem almost alive, as if it were a creature that had grown out of the fabric of space itself. "Keep your distance," Xira said suddenly, her voice steady but low. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." Liam nodded, his fingers tightening around the armrests. "Right. Let's make sure we don't get too close until we understand it better." As they neared, the shuttle shook slightly from the gravitational pull of the ship. Despite the tension in the air, Xira remained calm, her expert hands keeping the shuttle on course. She had seen much worse in her time, but there was something about this unknown vessel that kept her on edge. "We're getting closer," Liam muttered, staring at the swirling metallic surface of the ship. Still no response from them. No radio signals, no sign of life. Xira's gaze remained fixed on the ship. "I don't think they want to talk. They want us to come to them." She was right. The ship's presence in space didn't feel like a typical first contact situation. It wasn't waiting to greet them. It was waiting to test them. A feeling of dread washed over Liam, but he quickly pushed it aside. They couldn't afford fear now. The shuttle gently docked with the alien ship's outer structure, its surface an alien blend of materials, glossy and smooth, like metal, yet pulsating with an eerie energy. A soft, melodic hum reverberated through the shuttle, as if the ship itself was alive, breathing, and waiting. "Prepare yourself," Xira said as she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "We don't know what we'll find inside." Liam felt his heart race. He hadn't expected the ship to feel so alive. There was something primal about it. But Xira was already moving toward the airlock. She had dealt with danger before, faced countless unknown threats, and now, despite the fear gnawing at his insides, Liam followed her. Together, they stepped into the airlock. As the outer door sealed behind them, a soft blue light illuminated the space around them. The walls were smooth, almost soft to the touch, like the skin of some ancient creature. Liam could feel the hum in the air, the strange vibration that seemed to reverberate through his very bones. "I'm not sure about this," Liam whispered, more to himself than Xira. She glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "It's the only choice we have." They moved forward, the silence around them broken only by the low hum of the ship. They passed through narrow corridors that seemed to twist and bend in unnatural angles. It was as if the ship was alive, its structure constantly shifting. The walls pulsated gently, as though they were breathing in sync with the ship's own heartbeat. Liam's senses were on high alert as they moved deeper into the ship. His mind raced with questions. What kind of ship was this? Who or what had built it? And why had it come to Delta Colony? The corridors eventually opened up into a vast chamber, far larger than any part of the ship they had seen so far. In the center of the room stood a large floating platform, glowing softly with an unnatural light. It was surrounded by walls covered in strange symbols that Liam couldn't decipher. "This place feels wrong," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. "Like we're intruding." Xira turned to him, her expression hard. "We are. But it doesn't matter now." They approached the platform cautiously, each step filled with uncertainty. The air was thick with tension, the oppressive silence hanging over them like a cloud. Liam reached out to touch one of the symbols on the wall, his fingers grazing the surface. The moment his skin made contact, a sharp jolt of energy shot through his hand, making him flinch back in surprise. Xira moved quickly, grabbing his arm and pulling him back. "Don't touch it," she warned, her voice urgent. "It's a trap." Liam's heart raced as he looked at the symbols again, now knowing they were not just decorations, but a part of something far more dangerous. Whatever this ship was, it was not friendly. It was alive in ways that no one could truly understand. Xira scanned the room, her eyes narrowing. "I think they've been waiting for us." Before Liam could ask what she meant, the ship seemed to react. The platform in the center of the room began to hum louder, glowing brighter. Suddenly, the walls around them shifted, the symbols rearranging themselves into new patterns. And then, as if the ship had decided to reveal itself fully, the center of the platform opened, revealing a swirling mass of energy. Liam stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. Xira looked at him. Whatever happens now, it's out of our hands. Without another word, she moved toward the swirling energy. Liam hesitated for just a moment before following her, both of them stepping into the unknown. The moment Liam and Xira stepped into the swirling mass of energy, everything around them seemed to blur. The world shifted and twisted as though they were being pulled through a storm, caught in a force they couldn't understand. Time itself felt distorted. Seconds felt like hours, and yet no time seemed to pass at all. Liam gasped, feeling a strange pressure on his chest, as if the very air was becoming thicker around him. His head spun. Was this what the ship had been waiting for? The energy felt ancient, like something that had existed long before humanity, or even the aliens of Delta Colony. Xira's grip on him tightened, and he glanced over at her. She was calm, her expression focused, but there was a spark of recognition in her eyes, as if she knew what was happening, or at least had some idea. Then, just as quickly as it began, the storm of energy disappeared. The world around them snapped back into focus, and they found themselves standing in a completely different place. It wasn't the ship anymore. It wasn't even the same dimension. Liam staggered back, his breath shallow. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. They were no longer on the ship. In fact, they weren't even in space anymore. They stood on solid ground, surrounded by a vast landscape of shimmering, alien terrain. The sky above was not the familiar black of space. It was a strange purple hue, streaked with fiery red clouds. The ground beneath their feet was soft but firm, a mixture of glowing crystal-like rocks that sparkled in the dim light. The air felt cooler, thinner, almost metallic, and in the distance, towering structures stretched up toward the sky, reaching for the strange clouds above. Liam opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He felt like he was in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. "Where are we?" he finally managed to ask, his voice sounding small in this unfamiliar world. Xira's gaze swept across the landscape, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. She didn't seem as shocked as Liam, though the confusion was evident in her face. "We're not in our universe anymore. This is another dimension, or something similar, a place outside of time and space as we know it." Liam's head spun. Another dimension. Was this how the alien ship operated? Had it been designed to travel through not just space, but alternate realities? "I don't understand," he said, struggling to wrap his mind around it. "How can this be possible?" Xira took a step forward, her boots crunching against the glowing ground. "This ship, it's not just a ship. It's a gateway, a bridge between worlds. And we've just crossed it." Before Liam could respond, a low hum filled the air, rising in pitch until it was almost deafening. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, and the strange landscape began to shift again. A figure appeared in the distance, slowly taking shape out of the shimmering air. It was tall, far taller than any human, with a form that was both humanoid and alien. Its skin was translucent, glowing faintly with a soft, pale light, and its eyes were large and black, reflecting the strange world around them. It wore no clothes, only a shimmering robe-like garment that seemed to flow and shift with the air. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. This was what they had come for, wasn't it? The beings behind the ship, the ones who had brought them here. But who were they? And why were they here? The figure took a step forward, and as it did, the ground beneath it seemed to pulse, sending ripples through the air. The creature moved with slow, deliberate steps, its gaze fixed on Liam and Xira. Xira stepped in front of Liam instinctively, her posture defensive, but she didn't make a move to attack. They didn't know what they were up against, and for the first time since arriving, Liam felt a shiver of fear. This creature was not like anything he had ever seen before. It was as if it had been born of the very fabric of this strange world. The figure stopped a few feet away, and for a long moment there was silence. Then it spoke, its voice calm but resonant, echoing in Liam's mind rather than in his ears. "You are the ones who have crossed the boundary," the being said. Its voice was not loud, but it carried a weight of authority that made Liam's heart skip a beat. "Why have you come?" Liam opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Sira was the first to answer, her voice steady despite the confusion. "We didn't choose to come," she said. "We were brought here by the ship. It led us here." The figure studied her, its black eyes reflecting the swirling landscape around them. It didn't seem surprised. In fact, it looked almost as though it had been expecting them. "The ship has chosen you," it said, its voice a strange mixture of curiosity and something more ancient. "It has been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Liam asked, his voice rising with the intensity of his questions. "Who are you? What is this place?" The being tilted its head slightly, its translucent skin shifting, as if it were considering the question. "We are the keepers of the boundary," it finally said. "And this place, this is where the boundaries between worlds are maintained. It is where all realities converge." Liam's mind raced. This was too much to take in. What kind of beings were these keepers? And what did they want with him and Sira? "The ship you came on is a vessel of transition," the keeper continued, its voice lowering to a whisper that filled Liam's mind. "It has brought you here to understand, to witness the truth." "What truth?" Liam asked, his voice shaking slightly. The keeper's eyes seemed to penetrate his very soul. "The truth that you and your people are not alone in the universe. You have been living in the shadows, unaware of the vast web that connects all realities. But now you have seen what lies beyond the veil. Now you are part of it." The words echoed in Liam's mind, and he felt the weight of their meaning. He and Sira weren't just passengers in this journey. They were players in something far bigger, something that spanned across dimensions. And that truth would change everything. The keeper's words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Liam felt a chill run down his spine as the realization of what he had just heard started to sink in. This place, this alien world, was more than just a strange location in the universe. It was a key to understanding everything. The vast web of realities, all connected, stretching far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. He glanced at Sira. Her expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was a soldier, trained to face danger, but this was something far beyond her experience. And Liam, though not a soldier, felt the same way. This wasn't a battle they could fight with weapons. This was something more profound. "What do you mean, the truth?" Liam finally asked, his voice steady despite the overwhelming feeling of being small, insignificant in this vast, strange world. "What truth are we supposed to witness?" The keeper's eyes, black and deep, seemed to peer into him as if it could see his very thoughts. "You are part of a larger story, human. Your world is one of many. You think of it as the center of existence, but it is not. The fabric of reality is far more complex than you can comprehend. Your people have been isolated, kept in the shadows of the greater web that connects all worlds." Liam's mind raced. "So, what are you saying?" "That we're not alone. That we never have been." The keeper nodded slowly. "Exactly. The ship you arrived on is one of many tools that travel between the boundaries of worlds. But only those chosen can cross the boundary, to see the truth beyond." Liam felt a rush of emotions, fear, awe, confusion, swirling within him. "But why us? Why have we been chosen?" "You have been chosen because you are ready to understand," the keeper replied. Its voice resonated in his mind, calming yet still filled with power. Your people have lived in isolation for too long. The boundaries that separate you from the greater web are fading, and it is time for you to see the larger picture. You must decide how you will fit into it. Zira spoke next, her voice calm but firm. What exactly do you want from us? What role do we play in all of this? The keeper turned its head slightly, as though considering her words carefully. You have already played a part. Your arrival here, your willingness to cross the boundary, has set events in motion that cannot be undone. But the role you will take from here, that is up to you. Liam looked around at the strange, alien landscape, the glowing terrain beneath his feet, the purple sky above. This was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He had thought humanity's struggle was simply to survive, to expand, to explore. But now he understood. The universe was far bigger, far more complex than he could have ever dreamed. And the journey that had started with a single ship, a ship from space, had led him and Sira here, to this moment. We're supposed to change something, aren't we? Liam asked softly, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This isn't just about exploration. It's about our place in the universe. The keeper did not answer immediately. Instead, it glanced over at the towering structures in the distance, their shimmering outlines glowing faintly in the strange light of the sky. The truth you seek is not easily understood, but it is necessary. For every world, every reality, there is a time of transition, a time when the walls between realities thin and the path ahead must be chosen. You are at that crossroads. Sira's eyes narrowed. And what happens if we make the wrong choice? The keeper's form shimmered as it spoke again. There is no right or wrong choice. There is only the path you choose. But be warned, the path of ignorance will lead to destruction. The walls that separate realities are fragile, and those who ignore the greater web will bring ruin not only to their own world, but to all worlds. Liam felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This wasn't just about humanity's future. It was about the future of all existence. The keeper was warning them, but it wasn't offering them guidance. It was offering them the choice to understand, to change everything, or to remain blind and bring disaster. Why don't you just tell us what to do? Liam asked, his voice rising with frustration. Why leave it up to us? Why make it so hard? The keeper's gaze softened, and for a moment, it almost seemed sad. The answers must come from within you. To truly understand, you must first choose to believe, to accept that your reality is not the center of all things, that you are part of something far bigger. Only then will you find the path forward. Liam felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. How could he, a simple man, carry the weight of such a decision? He wasn't a leader, wasn't prepared for this responsibility. The survival of his world, and perhaps countless others, was in his hands, and in Sira's hands as well. Sira took a step forward, her eyes fixed on the keeper. We understand that this is important, but we don't know what you expect from us. What are we supposed to do now? The keeper looked at her, its black eyes seeming to consider her words. You must return to your world, it said slowly. The time of isolation is over. The boundaries that separate your reality from others will soon weaken. You will need to guide your people, show them the truth, help them find their place in the greater web. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The choice. The decision that would change everything. They had to return. But would their people be ready for the truth? Would they believe what they had seen? And if not, what would happen? Before he could voice his concerns, the keeper raised a hand, and the shimmering landscape around them began to blur again. The time for questions is over, the keeper said. Your path is clear. Go now. Liam turned to Sira, his thoughts swirling. She nodded, her expression serious but resolute. They didn't have all the answers, but they knew this much. The journey had just begun. The strange world around Liam and Sira began to fade. The shimmering alien landscape, the purple sky, and the towering structures all blurred and shifted as if they were mere images in a dream. Liam blinked, trying to hold on to the last remnants of the world they had just seen. But in the blink of an eye, they were back on the alien ship, standing in the very room where they had first stepped through the swirling mass of energy. Liam's breath came in shallow gasps, his heart racing. His head was spinning. And for a moment, he wasn't sure if what had just happened was real. Had they truly seen another world? Had they really spoken to the keeper of the boundary? Zira stood beside him, her expression unreadable, her eyes scanning the ship's interior. The hum of the ship's engines was still present, but it now felt distant, like an echo. Everything seemed quieter now, less intense, but the weight of what they had learned was pressing down on Liam. "Are we really back?" he asked, his voice a little shaky. He was still trying to process everything. The keeper, the truth about the boundaries between realities, the warning they had received. Zira didn't answer immediately. She was lost in thought, her gaze distant. Finally, she turned to Liam. "We're back, but things have changed. We can't go back to what we knew before." Liam nodded slowly, his mind still reeling. "The keeper said we have to show our people the truth. But how? They won't believe us." "I don't know," Zira admitted, "but we can't ignore it. We have to try." The thought of returning to Earth, of facing the people they had left behind, made Liam uneasy. How could they explain what they had seen? How could they make anyone believe in the things they had experienced? The truth was far too big, far too impossible for most to accept. And yet, deep down, Liam knew they had no choice. The keeper had said it was the only way forward. Zira turned to the ship's console, pressing a few buttons. The view of space outside the window shifted, and they could see the blue-green sphere of Earth, their home, growing larger in the distance. The shuttle was already on course for re-entry. It was time to go back. Liam felt a pang of fear in his chest. He wasn't afraid of returning to Earth. He was afraid of what would happen when they told their people the truth. He had seen what humanity was capable of, how they reacted to the unknown. They feared what they didn't understand, and the truth they had learned. Well, it was beyond anything anyone could understand. As they drew closer to Earth, the reality of their situation began to set in. The time of isolation for humanity was over. They could no longer ignore the truth. The boundaries between worlds were thinning, and if humanity didn't adapt, they would be left behind, trapped in ignorance, while the rest of the universe moved on without them. "We have to be ready for anything," Zira said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "When we land, we'll have to take action. We can't wait for the truth to be accepted. We need to help our people see it for what it is." Liam nodded, but his mind was still racing. What kind of action? What could they possibly do to prepare a world that wasn't ready? They didn't have all the answers. They didn't even have a plan. But they had to try. For Earth. For the future. The shuttle's engines rumbled as it entered Earth's atmosphere. The familiar sights of their home planet filled the window, and Liam felt a strange mix of relief and fear. He had been away for so long, but now that he was finally returning, everything felt different. The world he knew seemed far away, as if it no longer belonged to him. As they descended toward their landing site, Zira glanced over at Liam. "Are you ready?" Liam wasn't sure if he was ready, but he nodded. There was no turning back now. The keeper had been clear. The truth would change everything. The walls between realities were thinning, and humanity had to find its place in the greater web of existence. It was a truth that would be hard to accept, but it was a truth they couldn't ignore. They landed smoothly, the shuttle's engines whirring as they touched down on the designated landing pad. The hatch opened, and Liam stepped out onto the familiar soil of Earth. It felt strange, as though the ground beneath his feet was somehow different. Or perhaps it was him who had changed. A group of officials was waiting for them, their faces serious as they approached. They had been informed of the mission's success, but they didn't know what Liam and Zira had learned. They didn't know what lay beyond the stars. "We've made contact with the alien ship," Sierra said, her voice firm. "But there's more. Much more than you can imagine." The officials exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure of how to respond. But before they could speak, Liam stepped forward. "The truth is bigger than any of us. We've seen another world. We've learned that our reality is just one of many, and the boundaries between those worlds are breaking down. It's time for humanity to face the truth." There was a long silence as the officials processed his words. Liam could see the skepticism in their eyes, the disbelief. They weren't ready for this, but it didn't matter. The truth was here now, and there was no going back. "We have to prepare," Zira said, her voice calm but urgent. "The world is changing, and if we don't understand what's happening, we will be left behind." One of the officials stepped forward, his face hard. "You expect us to believe this?" "It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not," Liam said, his voice growing more confident. "It's the truth, and you need to accept it." The official hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We'll begin preparations. But know this, we can't do this alone." Liam met Sierra's gaze, and for the first time since their journey began, he felt a spark of hope. The truth was out there. And maybe, just maybe, humanity would be able to accept it and find its place in the greater universe. As they walked away from the landing pad, Liam couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had been given a chance to see beyond the veil. And now, they had to choose how they would move forward.